This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
So welcome back to the Motivation Podcast. So today we are talking money, moolah, bank, loot, dollar bills, y'all. You see, life's financial journey, if it were a motorcycle, your mindset would be the engine. And it's either clogged up with scarcity and fear, maybe a little crud built up, needing a fresh flush, or it's running smooth with abundance. Even at our best, there's many of us that are unknowingly carrying the weight of outdated financial beliefs, seizing our engines that otherwise would be cruising smoothly. So our guest today, Sarah Penfold, knows all about breaking free from those money-related limiting beliefs. So we met Sarah at last year's Women's Moto Summit, and she's here to help us tune up our financial engines and hit the throttle towards abundance. Her program, Sarah Penfold Financial Wellness, was born from her own journey of transforming her relationship with money, and now she's here sharing this roadmap with all of us. Today, Sarah will teach us how to recognize and let go of limiting money stories we've inherited, how to build a relationship with money that actually works for us, and how to shift into the financial habits that empower us to achieve our biggest goals. This is your motivation.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for carving up the time. I honestly couldn't think of a better conversation to be having to kick off our first interview in a while. Here on the Motivation, we've talked about emotional wellness, our social wellness, our physical wellness. We have never tapped into our financial wellness. So first of all, thank you for carving out the time and space.
Oh my gosh, my absolute pleasure. I could talk about money till I'm blue in the face.
Excellent, because we're going to do that for at least an hour. But, you were at the Women's Moto Summit, which is such an incredible event. It's happening again this September. The feedback from your talks were so very positive because this is a subject so many of us shy away from. I feel as though when it comes to money, we view it as the haves, the have-nots, the ones that get it, the ones that do not, something to be feared versus something to accrue. Sometimes we have beliefs around what money means for us as a person, whether it makes us a good person or a bad person. And when there's experts around money, I think we can be disillusioned that somehow someone like yourself, Sarah, just always understood it. Always got it from the get-go, maybe grew up with the knowledge. And I know that's not the case. So starting off, talk to me about your journey, because I understand your family was in farming where obviously anyone that knows agriculture, money and sense matter, but you didn't necessarily get the literacy knowledge at the same time.
Totally. Yeah. So my story, humble beginnings, right? I was born on a farm and my father's lineage is farmers as far back as I know, and even before they immigrated. So, that was like, I didn't grow up in money. I don't have an economics degree. In fact, my lowest grade ever in my entire educational history was in economics 101.
Wild.
Yeah, I know, right?
Talk about a lack of foreshadowing in your life.
Totally. And my initial career was in outdoor rec management. So I spent a lot of time out in the wilderness with, different groups and kids. And so that wasn't like an incredibly lucrative career. And then I switched into, PM, project management professional. But it wasn't until I was like in my mid 40s and I was kind of looking down the back half of my career that I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how much I need for retirement. And I'm single, so I only had myself to rely on. So I was feeling very vulnerable and isolated. I knew I was intelligent, but I felt so dumb when it came to anything financial. Like,
Oh God, speaking to the choir.
Right. Deer in the headlights. Like I call it the Charlie Brown effect. When you watch the Charlie Brown movies and the adults are like, wah, wah, wah.
Yes, totally.
That was me.
Exactly.
That was me. When it came to money, I would go into this disassociation and like, that's like, there's so much energy and stuff around money, right? Shame, guilt. And so all that was kind of alive in me. I didn't have a ton of debt, but I had these small debt cycles where, I would kind of pop out of them, but then I would slowly work my way back in. And I was just never able to save in the way that I felt like I should be saving. And then I was 6 or 7 years behind in my taxes. 6 years, 7 returns, because I had to do corporate taxes. But all this to say, like, my money was kind of a mess, right? And like everyone has their version of that. And I want to say that because I thought I was like the only person in the entire world that had financial issues. And I knew it wasn't true, but still there's that feeling. That
we don't talk about it.
No.
Like that there, because of
We
the
don't.
source of shame. We do it in hiding, and kind of I love how you kind of describe the cycles and the rest of it, and that wah feeling, because I think we almost want to ignore it. Like, if I just don't look at it,
oh my gosh, totally.
then we're good.
Yeah.
And also it dominates so much of like our regular life, your bills, your this, what are you paying for? You're constantly making these transactions. And so there's also that feeling of like, why would I want to talk about something that I have no competence in? It's already uncomfortable and stressful. I'm having to think about and do it throughout so much of my day already. And so when you are with friends or you are with other, you know what I mean? It feels also too like, why would I want to talk about that? So you even avoid it further. I feel like myself anyways.
Totally. And the thing is, like, money is a through line through everything in life, right? Whether you want it to be true or not, it is. It impacts how we can physically take care of our health. It impacts, I was just talking to someone the other day, like even social situations. If you're struggling and you're not, and your friends don't know, and you go out to say dinner and everyone's like, oh, let's just split the bill. And you really consciously like try to like keep your costs low, that like, boom, there it is right in your face. Right.
Such a good example. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I mean, I can certainly relate to that. And I feel like the more I've talked to people, there's always something like that, or they go out with friends and they want to go do some big extravagant adventure. And you're kind of like, paying down my debt or can't afford it. And
which is something that you actually should have pride in if you're taking accountability and awareness over it, but we don't view it that way. I'm really curious.
Mind fuck. So
it is a mind fuck. Yeah. Like, I mean, I was really open about it even on this podcast. Like, I went on the ride of my life of variable mortgage, and then also becoming like a single homeowner of that, where I was just like, holy fucker doodle. Like, but I had a friend as well that was on like the variable ride, which I probably should have hopped off at some point. But it was funny because I was like the first person that she talked to openly. Like, I just practiced gratitude that I could do it. Like, I definitely wasn't saving as much, but I was like, thank fuck I can actually do this. And for her, she was just like, oh, thank God somebody else is in the same boat as me, because she was feeling so stressed. And that connection, I mean, we've made a joke every time the rates have gone down, where we're like virtual high five kind of thing, because we've been in it together. But she felt so lonely in it, because not only was she managing her home, single woman, but also managing her business. And she's like, I don't have the extra, like the stress was massive. So to be able to have a space to vent that and feel safe, we don't have a lot of those around money.
No, you touch on a couple of really important things. One is the taboo of it, right? And, I met you last year as part of that incredible event. I cannot wait for this year. And like the closeness and the welcoming, and like, we have intimacy in our lives with like strangers or friends. And, we might know all of these intense things that have happened to someone, but do we know about their money? Right. Oftentimes we don't, because it is so taboo and we don't talk about it. And then the other thing that I really want to highlight that you said was the connection, right? When you found someone who was going through the same thing as you, just that community and that like collaboration support is so important. Because I heard this recently, again, I've heard it before, but that the antidote to shame is community and connection. And that's one of the whys that I do what I do. I have group programs that I really encourage people to come to the groups, because even though if they feel ashamed, because it's like, it's so healing to sit in a room with other people who are having these issues, and to normalize it and to support each other, when I first found my mentor and did her program, I remember the moment I was like, when you're about to reveal something really vulnerable and you kind of feel like you're going to throw up a little bit.
All too well.
Yeah. So I was in this group and I was about to share that, or I shared that I was so far behind in my taxes, and I tried numerous times, and I had that freeze come over me every time I would try. It just felt so much work, and I didn't even know where to start. And someone in the group was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in the same boat." And so we ended up having accountability dates. So we would get together at least once a week, and she'd sit on Zoom and I'd sit on Zoom, and we'd just work on our tax stuff. We didn't it was just to do it in community. And at the end of that program, so 3 months, all seven returns of paperwork was to my bookkeeper. So there was still a process to go through, but my work in it was mostly done. And I could not have done that without her. And I feel like one of the things that I learned kind of on the same tone as like the community as the antidote to shame is in our vulnerability, we find our common ground, right? So being able to be the person to like take that deep breath and say the thing, guaranteed someone is in a very similar, if not the same boat, and to just have the courage to do it.
When you say about community, and I immediately think of, finances becomes this kind of lonesome thing. And if you have a partner, you might talk about it. You might not, even in that regard. But when you go back to the original community that money grows within, it's within your family dynamic.
Yeah.
And that is where you almost learn almost always this isolated version of finance, because how like my family was just like either arguing about money, one person or another was shaming of how the other was spending the money.
Yep.
And then they'd turn around and say things like, save your money. What does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like how you're expecting me with my impulse control to like not buy those sweet Etnies shoes and like pack this money away for, I have no idea why. Like it was just all these very thrown around things. And so what's kind of your perception or your understanding of how those early developmental experiences shape your relationship with money?
Such a great question. We all learn about money, and we all learn about money from our family, whether we're actually taught, consciously taught about it or not. Your point, Lori, about hearing people fight about money, like that can create in someone's body the belief, subconscious or not, that like money is a source of strife, right? My thing that I had to work through, and still it comes up, is like from that lineage of farmers. Farmers have to work really hard, physically hard for their money, right? And so I had this subconscious belief that if I was going to make more money, I would have to put out more energy. And so the thought of doing anything to increase my income or whatever felt exhausting. Like there was a limited amount of energy, and it was directly proportional to the amount of money that I was capable of making. So that sort of kept me under earning for a long time, and like not putting myself out there, maybe taking a little bit of risks when it came to looking. At that point, I wasn't doing coaching, but like looking for jobs that would pay me more and like put myself out there a little bit more. So it was a really interesting thing when I uncovered that, because it wasn't conscious. I didn't consciously go around thinking, oh, I have a lineage of farmers and therefore I'm afraid of working hard. No, like right. I was a hard worker, but it just, the way I related it to the money I was making was dysfunctional. And so actually I did a workshop last night and I talked about this exact thing, is like, when we're born, I love a metaphor, by the way, and your motorcycle metaphor at the beginning was like perfect. So
we love
a metaphor.
I do terrible ones often, but I love them.
Oh, they're so powerful because our subconscious mind works in metaphor, right? So it can really like help things land for people. But the metaphor is like when you're born until you're about 8 years old, I call it the like your operating system is being programmed. So for like computers, right, those first 8, and arguably a little bit more, but definitely those first 8 years are really installing programs, default programs into our system. And they rarely leave, but we can become conscious of them and we can learn to work with them in different ways. And so, yeah, the family is the source often of that initial, not often, but like always that initial programming. And then throughout life, in our teens, our 20s, we look for evidence, or we just have these assumptions that the world is a certain way. And so we keep reinforcing those beliefs by like seeing the thing we want to see, or being in community and like having that like reflected back at us. So part of the money work is uncovering those pieces. I teach literacy because literacy, like, knowledge is power, knowing how the system works. Like even just learning that is like such an incredible shift, right? Especially as someone, like I said, who I'm educated, and I was like, I felt so dumb. Like just learning the things was so powerful. Managing the money, creating an actual relationship with it where I'm like engaging with it and looking at it. That is also crucial. But I feel like this, I call it the financial EQ, right? Understanding your personal relationship with money is kind of the glue that will make everything stick more powerfully, because eventually you're going to bump up against something, right? Money is like an up and down journey throughout your life. That's one of the things that I even have to remember, but that I tell people, it's like your immediate circumstances aren't forever. They're just a phase. And so having these tools to kind of not get stuck in the emotion or the like what's going on, and just navigating it differently so that you can come out the other side and like keep on trucking, you know?
I find it so fascinating because I've just been shining a light on this personally. Because again, obviously I went through a huge life shift last year, and it's interesting when you talk about the system, and my mindset for so long was fuck you and fuck the system. I know a lot of that stems, I came from scarcity mindset. My dad was an individual that worked for himself and unfortunately struggled with illness. And so when he didn't work, there was no money coming in. And so on the outside, we lived a nice life in a nice home. And I was also the gal that taped my pants together at the bus stop. And I was also the gal that then got moved to a town that was pretty affluent, and everyone was going to their horseback riding lessons. And my sister and I would get the Sears wish book, make a Christmas list, and then edit it down because we thought it was too expensive for our parents. And so it was like this weird on the outside how things work and on the inside. And it kind of like, because of that duality, I was just kind of like, money is pretentious, money isn't for me. And I really limited my earning power. I have been going through such a transformative shift mentally over what my capability is. And to your point, getting really honest, because I had full scarcity mindset. I also had a partner that loved to spend, and I felt so accountable for their debt love. So it's like any bonus I would ever have, I never actually kept it for myself. It went to that. And so it's just fascinating when you do dissect and you're like, why did I do those behaviors? Why do I feel this way? Why is it such a trigger? And now that I've finally started shining a light and looking, I'm like, holy fuck, the possibilities on the other side. When people have that aha moment and they're willing to have the conversation, what are the first things that you try to instill in them to start healing that relationship around money?
Yeah. I really believe that looking is such an important first step, because everything kind of hinges on knowing where you're at. And it's the thing that is always has that first big wall of resistance for so many people. And I get it. Like, I'm only 5 or 6 years in from having had to go through that block myself. So I can understand. It's like that, what you talked about earlier, the don't look. If I don't look, I don't have a problem. But you know something. It's not right. And so, my friends, the only way is through it. You can't go around it. You know, there's no shortcuts.
That's our big motto for like everything. Like, can't go around it, can't go over it, gotta go through it.
Gotta go through it.
But it's empowering on the other side. That's where all your power is. That's where.
Yes, 100%. And because a lot of my clients, they don't feel in control. They don't have the confidence. And all of that is on the other side of taking that look and getting educated.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about like the associations that you had with like money in the system. And I try and tease those two things apart, because I am the first to say that the system is a racket. Like, it is corrupt. It is the debt economy, like keeping people in debt, especially in North America. Like, it's astonishing. We are people who have credit card debt are the best return on investment for banks. Like, nowhere else can you get a guaranteed return on an investment of 20%. Like, it's absolute highway robbery. Anyway, rant aside, teasing
it's a fair rant.
It's a fair rant. Yeah. Teasing out the fact that like the system is corrupt, but money itself is neutral and benign, right? Like a car or a motorcycle. Like, it's just a thing. The person who gets on the thing is going to decide how like safe or not the car or the bike is. And so one of my favorite quotes is, I guess it's almost my own, I kind of adapted it, but like, money is an amplifier, and it amplifies the hearts of the people who wield it. And I love that word wield, because how we handle and use and spend and invest our money is so powerful. And I realize, and when I tease those things apart, that staying ignorant of the system was not. I'm a bit of a rebel. I have like a bit of a rebel archetype in me. Yes, I imagine so in this community. I love it.
We're like, where are your people?
Yeah, you so are. Oh my gosh, last year I was like, my peeps.
You're like,
but I that kind of rebel kept me from like, oh, I don't want to engage with the system. If I do, then I'm like corrupt, just like the system. And what I realized is that the biggest protest and active protest against the system is getting literate, managing your money wisely, and not giving a cent more of interest than you have to banks and organizations. So, yeah, it was kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but it's really like teasing out the difference between the system and money.
That's where you talk about the literacy is power, because that's just it, right? It's that like looking at like hear no evil, see no evil. If I don't hop on the game board, I don't have to play the game. But the reality of it is that we live in a world where you cannot, well, for the most part, you know, there's a rare few that are able to do life without monetary exchange.
Yeah.
And having a knowledge of not only, because that's the other thing too, is like, there's a reason that they try and make it sound and make it so complicated to make you want to just go, I don't know, I put my hands in the air, you take it and deal with it, you know? And if I lose out on it, whatever, I don't care, just so long as my sanity and better understanding a foundational groundwork, and then empowering you to be like, this is an investment. This is also the bigger picture you're investing towards. And so you have options. And just like, that's just a little example that I've just learned over the last couple of years. But even when you get those little steps of empowerment, I know for myself, who is quite financially illiterate and is taking micro steps to change that. But every time I do, my anxiety goes down around it. And I feel that just that much more. So it's like, it's so beautiful, because I just think, before it was like, I thought I had to cannonball into it, and that was so anxiety inducing. And then as soon as I even had anything that felt overwhelming, I was like, see, this is why I don't fuck with it. And then now it's like, just learn one thing, and that anxiety goes down. I feel more empowered. I get to see it in real time as I put my money elsewhere or whatever it looks like. And so that literacy, I think, is such an incredible, important step, which I know is part of your kind of trifecta that you've talked about, or your pillars, your pillars.
Actually, I've literally used the trifecta word the other day. because I love it. It's like, yeah, the secret sauce, because, I talked about having tried to get help prior to like finding the person that actually ended up flipping the switch for me. And I was just trying things in isolation. So the first person I tried was, like the woo, manifestation and abundance little mini course, right? And it was all about like saying the mantras and like it was all the energetic work of it. And I don't want to diss on the energetic work, but to do it in isolation,
yes,
like it was just, it ended up being feeling kind of scammy, and then I hired someone to help me with the bookkeeping piece to just try and get like the taxes caught up. And the thing about a bookkeeper is they don't coach you. You have to like give information to them. So it wasn't the support that I needed. But again, it was like, oh, I failed again. Like it was another kind of like knockdown. And then I hired someone to help me specifically with the system. But without that EQ piece, I just kept getting in my own way. Every time I sat down to do the thing that she asked me to do, I like this fog would come over and I would get confused. Like I would like the nervous system would just sort of take over, right? Like that's the installed program of like, this is hard. I was like, and I didn't have the tools at that point to regulate my nervous system and to understand that like I could actually sit through and just do like 30 minutes of something and like, okay,
that past was coming into the present, right? That farmer family, whatever it is that whoever you are and whatever you've learned, that's what's happening. The past wiring that comes into that present moment. It's and that's the work that I on in my own career is working with emotional regulation, intelligence. And one of the biggest things, like you said, is rather than that being a sign to flee, rather than that being a sign to say, shut her down, this isn't for you. That's actually the time to stay, because staying within it and learning something and getting on the other side is what rewires you to learn that you actually have a capacity. And that then again keeps bringing that anxiety down when you enter the world of finance, money,
Totally. And one of the things I tell people is when you sit down to work on your money, schedule it at a time when you know you're going to be well resourced and
love that
present, right? So don't schedule on a Friday night. Like you're at the end of a work week. Like I am done on a Friday night. I just want to like curl up with my romantasy books, which I've just been getting into. Oh my God.
Yes.
That's a whole other podcast. So like that's my Friday night. That's my Friday night tonight. I'm just like, I may, it's the one night of the week where I really let myself, like I'll order the DoorDash. Like that's my boundary around it. Friday night, I'm allowed to order in food and like do zero things, totally like dissociate. On Saturday mornings, I've usually had an incredible sleep. It's part of the weekend, like the whole weekend is in front of you. You don't have much going on. That's when I do my money date once a month on a Saturday morning, because like not all the time, but like that's usually when I am like the best resource to look at the money stuff. But to your point, Lori, around like, you still have to be able to navigate a little bit of discomfort, right? So being like, oh, I feel nervous, I'm not going to work on my money. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's what I'm saying is know when you have capacity in your body. And then when it comes up, there are tools to like shift it, right? To help your body feel safe. I'm about to look at money. It's safe. I'm not going to die. It's okay, because it really is training. It's like adding those little upgrades or, what are they called? The little Chrome extensions, right? Like adding those little extensions to your programming so that like you're like, okay, associating with money in a way that is not like threatening. Right.
One of the things that I appreciate so much about your story, and I think will be so relevant to our audience, is obviously our demographic is a lot of women that are in the throes of midlife. And there comes a point sometimes where we can mentally be like, I haven't figured this out now. I haven't looked at this now. This is just the way it is. You kind of marry the misery of your situation. Totally. Obviously, in all other facets of this podcast, and we're talking about emotional wellness, physical wellness, social wellness, we are constantly telling people that The minute we build awareness and are willing to actively participate, the change is possible. You yourself didn't get into this new journey until you were in your mid 40s. So
Yeah.
is it possible if somebody's like, I am up to my eyeballs, I don't know my way out of this, to find your way out of this? Is there a timestamp on that possibility, or is it always in our power to?
It's always in your power. Always, always. Yeah. Of course, it's better to start young, but when we're young, we're living life. Like there's other priorities. And so, not that we shouldn't, but like, I'm just saying that like, it's understandable why that wouldn't have been a priority, right? Your 20s are for like breaking away from family and home and like figuring who you are in the world. Right. So yeah, that said, the second best time is today. And, yeah, there really is no bad time to get in right relationship with money. Yeah.
How much has it changed your life actually having, like, I'm curious of two things, because you keep talking about that light switch moment. So I'm curious what that was with that particular person and how much the trajectory of your life changed once you decided to actively participate in how this looks.
It was, I can't remember if it was a specific moment, but the program that I took with her was 3 months. And it actually was right. COVID happened about 3 or 4 weeks after I started. And so it was kind of a gift in a way, even though like my anxiety during COVID was like, like through the roof. So I was dealing with like really high anxiety, but I also had time on my hands, right? Because everything shut down. So I was like, well, all right, I guess I'm going to dig in. And something just clicked and I freaking loved it. And like you were talking about, Lori, like you learn a little something and it's like, oh, it gives you confidence. And so it wasn't like I had to learn all the things and then there was a switch. It was like, as I was learning and growing, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. This is like way less of a big deal than I thought. Or trusting myself to start working the management system and not feel like, because I feel like when people hear, I try not to say budget because there's such a negative association with the word budget. People are like, oh, I'm going to have to sit in my house and never do anything for the rest of my life. And that's not true. It's just about managing how the money flows and how you access it at different times and for what. I really, really believe in building a values-based management system for yourself. So yeah, if you're someone who, has a motorcycle and wants to go on, the trips that are offered, then like, cool, we're going to build that into your budget, because I'm actually reading a book right now that really explains this. It's called Die with Zero, which is kind of a morbid title, but he talks about this where, dying with a whole bunch of money in the bank, of course, if you have kids, it's a bit different, but dying with a whole bunch of money in the bank, like that doesn't serve you, right? If you worked throughout your 30s and 40s, 50s, and didn't do all the things you wanted to do just to have all that money at the end of your life, when like your desire to do really goes down, like it's proven that like we just slow down when we're older. We just want to like garden and stay close to home. And so he really talks about how to manage that money through your life. It's not about not saving for retirement. Of course, he's very clear about that, because I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, YOLO, I'm just going to spend it all. Like, that is not what I'm saying, but it's about managing the money so that you're protected in your retirement. But you're also enjoying your life when you have the mobility and the capacity to do it. So that's how I perceive money management. It's not about restrictive budgets and the system that I have. You get a certain amount every couple of weeks and you can do whatever you want with it. Some money coaches, and I don't want to knock it, because this system does work for some people, where like you track every expense. Like some people, the way their brains work, they need to do that. That's totally fine if that works for you. That's, to me, is like counting calories, which makes me want to claw my eyeballs out with a rusty fork, like not interested. So
yeah.
So Yeah. And the system that I have, and this is actually a tip for anyone, is like, if you get a regular paycheck, or even if you don't, you can kind of manage it a bit differently. But if you have a regular paycheck, stop living to your employer's paycheck cycles. Like that is step number one, is to break free from that. And to the metaphor that I use is that your life is a business and your paycheck is the sales, or like the income that you make for the business. And then you're the employee of the business of your life. And so you pay yourself separate from that paycheck. And so when you work out the numbers, you figure out approximately how much it would take to live per month. Like this is your fun money, right? So the ordering food, the going out with friends, your Amazon purchases, whatever the things are that you want to categorize in your variable expenses. And then you pay yourself half of that amount on the first of the month and half of that amount on the second of the month. And it goes onto a preloaded credit card. So you're not racking up credit card debt. There's preloaded credit cards out there. You can still get your points, because I swear to God, every time I tell people they have to not live on their credit card, they're like, oh, points. And
that would have been the first thing that I say.
Seriously, like it is. And this is interesting because like when we talk about societal programming, like, wow, is that ever a program, right? That I can't not use a credit card because then I'll lose out on points. There's a real loss aversion. There's a psychological tendency to loss aversion of like what we're going to lose if we do something. But if you earn credit card debt, no amount of credit card spending is going to offset the interest that you have the
20% clawback.
Oh my gosh. And like the
for some points.
Yeah. Like the math is a math, right? But we don't go through the step of proving ourselves that. We just like, oh, but I don't want to lose the points. So I'm saying there's products out there, preloaded credit cards, where you can still use points and get bonuses, because we love that. But you're not using your credit card. I can't remember where we started with this question, but here we are.
Regardless of where we started, I'm so glad that this is where we ended, because I'm like, I do think it's, it's just so incredibly helpful, because it's such palatable information, digestible. Yeah. And that's exactly where we kind of go back to once again and touch upon. That's one of the things that makes this topic us so easily kind of run, shame, all those different things, is because it's just that it make so much of what we've been is undigestible, because it's so complicated and dense, and what and the words that get used and all the different things. And this is so digestible, which is so incredible.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's really one of my whys, is to like make money approachable, because I've done a lot of reading. That's all I read is like money books and and romantasy, as previously mentioned.
Friday night.
Guess what I'm doing tonight? Part of me really believes that like how money evolved, it's so sporadic and very situational. Like how debt was first like invented. Like these things just happen because of circumstances, and they ended up taking on a life of their own. And I honestly don't think when these things evolved that in that moment someone was being like, oh, I'm going to fuck shit up by doing this. Mm-hmm. Like some, yes, but like these were just solutions to problems that were being presented at a particular time in history.
There's always the person that comes along then and sees it and is like, now I'm going to fuck shit up.
Exactly.
There's always like, no matter what, right? Like no matter what takes place in the world, an opportunist or a, predator comes along and is like, yeah, I'm going to make this work for me, which is a lot of what I believe, I could be wrong, is what's happened also in that financial world.
I agree, because I think now that the system is the way it is, that there is a huge benefit to the people who kind of run the system, who gain from it.
Credit cards, right? We just said like the highway robbery of like the debt and all the things,
Totally. And I think that there is a huge benefit to them to keep the narrative that money is hard and that money is confusing.
Absolutely.
And that there's like this disparity of like people who know it and then everyone else.
Yeah.
Right.
And just trust us on it.
Totally.
Give me your money.
Well, there's a reason why I went through an entire educational system and never learned how to do my taxes, how to manage money. That was exempt from my entire curriculum. And my parents didn't teach it because they were in scarcity mindset. And that's why so many of us have gone through an entire adulthood without having the financial EQ.
Oh, it drives me crazy that it's not taught in the educational system, because show of hands, how many of us have used a sine wave in our adult lives?
Never even heard of what you just said.
Right. Calculus. Like I didn't.
Oh, drop that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't even know if I signed up for that. I had accounting class and I just remember having my head turned to the side when my friend French braided my hair and my teacher being like, Lori, enough. And I was like, okay.
I was good at math until I started saying, when am I ever going to use this? Like there was like fractions and this, that, and the other. And I was like, when am I ever going to use this? To the point I was so annoying. And it was the only class I was an honor roll student all of a sudden, because I was like, what the fuck am I going to use this for? My math grades just tanked. And my mom made me take math at U level my entire high school career just because she went back to school as an adult and needed grade 12 math. And it was like a real average drag.
That's
I'm still bitter.
Yeah. Oh man. Hey, I'm bitter about the fact that, so I grew up in Ontario, and Ontario had grade 13.
St. Catherine's in the house.
Oh yeah. Guelph.
Oh, nice.
But I am bitter that I had an entire year of my life robbed because of grade 13.
Right. Fair.
I want a class action lawsuit against the government of Ontario.
You guys have grade 13.
Yeah.
Well, they got rid of it later.
I know,
so I was
they were like, not needed. This is weird.
Isn't that brutal? I was like near the hybrid year where there was like some that still had to, and then I was the one coming up that didn't. And I was like, wonder how they feel up there. Just another lap.
I just, it was an entire, and I was like, when I allow myself to get a little like wound up about it, I'm like, that was an income earning year of my life that was lost. Like as a woman, that's significant. Like I'm like, yeah, who's a lawyer? I could talk to sue the Ontario government, like all of us, for like this robbed year. Anyway.
So we're all getting rich from a class action lawsuit. Excellent.
There we go. This is my new money, my new tactic.
Speaking of kids, you guys, and speaking of school, this is, and we talk about going back in family history and so forth. One question I have for you. So just to kind of put it into context. So I had a mom that I always thought she was the one that was bad with money, because she was always spending and being like, tell your dad it was 60% off, and like all the, job like, oh, you're buying again and stuff. And it was actually my mom that was quite money literate. And when they separated, and yes, she had like a few different jobs, but she ended up saving and just like making these incredibly smart moves that has put her in a position where she is like quite wealthy in her retirement. And all she ever told me was like, save your money, like you're going to need to save your money. But she never actually taught me in a way that piqued my interest or met me where I was at or anything. Now, I'm not saying that's a knock to my mom. She did the best that she could and all the things. But what's maybe some advice, or what would you kind of offer parents or families to be like, how to create a culture within the family that meets maybe where, young minds, I don't know if that's an area that and maybe it's one to think of, if not, because it's such a space where it starts, right? We know that's where it starts.
Totally. I eventually, yes, I have goals of like doing a parent child like mini course, but there's things that for sure that I think that I can still impart, like wisdom I can impart here. So one is, Laura, you mentioned early on, like the fighting in the family with money. So I think parents need to be really conscious of like, especially with the young kids, of like how they're communicating about money in front of their kids, and not having those like heated, hard conversations, right? Like teaching kids that money is like a tool, or like easy or fun, or like it's just part of life. And then normalize saving with kids, because one of the fascinating things that I've come to realize is that saving is a habit. And if we're not taught it, then it is really hard to start that. And I'll share my story around this. I was given an allowance as a kid, generous allowance, more than my friends. So I was like, ooh, cool. And so in some way I felt like affluent, right? Like I felt like, okay, there's money in like the family, and I understood what that felt like. But I was then responsible for, like, I couldn't ask mom and dad for $20 to go to the movies with my friends on Tuesday. Like, I got the money and I had to learn to budget it. So if I wanted to go to the mall and buy some makeup with my girlfriends, or, do like, that was my money to spend. I did work around the house for it, and I got my allowance, and then I managed it myself, which taught me a great skill. Like when I started having roommates and like living out on my own, I was the one that like paid all the bills and like divvied up so we still had landlines, and, divvying up the long distance phone calls. Like that was me, but I never learned to save. Like he never gave me my parents never gave me my allowance and like, okay, and you're going to put $5 in a savings account in the bank. Mm-hmm. I didn't normalize, like, man, I was about to say parting, but it's not parting with your money. It's like moving it to a different place. And so I share that because I had a coworker and a friend, and his grandfather really taught him money management and saving. He was in his late 20s and he bought his first condo because saving was normalized for him, and he was able to like do, and he lived an adventurous life, man. Like he was not like scrimping, and like he was not stingy. He just normalized that at an early enough stage in his life that he was able to capitalize on the compound interest that happens over like, the 15 years that he was doing that as a younger man. And so just normalizing that for your kids. Like if you have an allowance, like, okay, we're going to go to the bank, and now like you can just do it through the apps, right? Like you're going to put this much in a savings account. And, I've heard different things too, like one parent who bought their kids Disney stock, because they watch the Disney shows. And like just
cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like creating those associations, like just creating a different relationship with money. And I think just being aware of what you're programming into your kids. And it's hard when your own programming is coming.
I was going to say you're learning it
right?
in real time at the same time. Well, Lori, looking at the time, I think it's time for us to go motivation
maintenance time for it.
You have given us so many actionable takeaways throughout this conversation, but we do always like to leave people, and we love a metaphor, so a tool for their toolkit. So what do you have for us, Sarah?
Honestly, thing I've been really into recently is boundaries. And if you haven't read Boundary Boss by Terry Cole,
so good.
I think it is essential reading for any non-white man.
Isn't it?
It is. And maybe them too. But boundary work from like a personal perspective, protecting my energy, who I associate with the things that I do, the things I don't do, and how that relates to money and creating boundaries. That's what the money management is having just boundaries for your money. It's not about cutting things off, but like, I have a boundary of like, I'm only spending $1,000 a month or whatever it is on my variable expenses, so that I can like put other things away to keep me safe in the future and protected in the future. So, and it's deep personal work, man.
Yeah.
Boundaries is like,
and it's an always ever going journey.
Yeah, exactly. There's always another layer, but again, it's one of those things that, you talked about like the immensity of becoming financially literate. Like it's just, you just learn one little boundary and you see it take effect and you feel good and energized. And then it's like, okay, it bolsters me to do the next one. And the next one, it's just, you're retraining your nervous system. So, yeah.
Well, I have loved this conversation deeply, and we
Mhm.
do always end with a
Ew.
quote. But before we get there, I know that you offer webinars. Obviously, people can engage with your services as well. So what are the best ways that people can get in touch and start empowering themselves with the knowledge to take those micro steps?
Yeah. So timing is really interesting because I am about to start my group program, which I only do 3 times a year. So that's starting January 28th. All the information can be found on just at sarahpenfold.com. That's my website. And then I'm at Sarah Financial Wellness on all the things, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. So yeah, I slip into my DMs. Like, I'm cool with
Hey,
that.
girl, hey.
Not on romanticizing
Hey,
Friday
girl,
night.
Hey, yeah, there you go.
The other
Yeah.
night.
Slip into my DMs tonight and we'll talk about things. Yeah.
They'll be like, money is sexy.
Yeah.
Takes a whole new tone on Fridays.
Yeah. Well, what is the quote that you'd like to leave us on today?
I have a quote from Marianne Williamson, and it is it is not too late. You are not too old. You are right on time, and you are better than you know.
Just want to say thank you so much for coming on this morning.
So welcome.
It was wonderful. I absolutely adored your talk at the summit. And I can't encourage people enough to, first off, go to your social media, because I just love all the little tidbits that you share. And so that gives you such a great window into what I can only imagine you're going to receive in the workshops. I'd love to do them. When you said the 28th, I was like, damn it. Because I am doing my own little workshops with young youth, those exact same days for 8 weeks. But I'll have to keep my eye out for the next one. But truly, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time today. This morning.
It was such a pleasure. It was great to reconnect, and I can't wait for Moto this year.
Good. All right, my friends, that is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Laura Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.